Almost everything you picture when you think of ancient Egyptian writing is wrong, and it's wrong in a way that changes how you see the entire civilization. Those crisp rows of birds, eyes, and beetles carved into temple walls, Egyptians almost never wrote that way in daily life. Hieroglyphs were the formal dress uniform of their culture, reserved for monuments, tombs, and the gods. The word itself comes from the Greek for sacred carving, and that's exactly what it was: sacred and carved and slow. The writing that actually ran Egypt for 3,000 years was something else entirely: faster, plainer, and far stranger to modern eyes. It was a flowing cursive that most people today have never even heard of, and it was hiding in plain sight the whole time, in museums, in textbooks, even on the single most famous artifact in the history of writing. Here's why this matters. A civilization does not survive for millennia on stone carvings. It survives on paperwork, tax rolls, grain accounts, letters, contracts, court records, even shopping lists. Carving a single line of formal hieroglyphs into stone could take a craftsman hours, and it needed a wall, a workshop, and a plan. You cannot run an empire at that speed. So from almost the very beginning, Egyptian scribes used a second script, written with a reed brush and ink, quick enough to keep pace with human speech and human commerce. Egyptologists call it hieratic, from a Greek word meaning priestly, a label pinned on it much later by the writer Clement of Alexandria. Literacy in ancient Egypt was rare and precious. By many estimates, only a small percentage of people could read and write at all. That tiny, powerful class of scribes didn't spend their days chiseling monuments. They spent them writing cursive. Once you know this everyday script exists, the whole picture of ancient Egypt quietly rearranges itself. Hieratic is nearly as old as hieroglyphs. Narration hieratic was not some late shortcut. It appears almost as early as hieroglyphs themselves, back in the first dynasties around 3000 BCE. Picture the two scripts as twins, raised for completely different jobs. Hieroglyphs were pictures, each sign a recognizable image, carefully drawn or carved, able to face left or right, and stack into elegant columns. Hieratic was that very same Egyptian language, written in a hurry. There was a direct correspondence. Every hieratic sign began life as a specific hieroglyph, so the two systems shared the same underlying spelling. But drawn with a brush at speed, the pictures collapsed into quick, abstract strokes. A bird became a couple of flicks. An owl became a squiggle. Signs that sat side by side got joined into ligatures, the way our own handwriting connects letters. And scribes added little shorthand marks to bundle common groups together. To an untrained eye, it looks like careless scribbles. To a scribe, it was simply reading and writing, and it demanded years of training to master. A boy might spend a decade in a scribal school copying model texts over and over until the shapes flowed automatically from his hand, the way a modern signature does from ours. And unlike carving, hieratic had direction and discipline. In its earliest phases, it could still be written in columns, like hieroglyphs, but it settled into tidy horizontal rows, running almost always from right to left, and the finest examples show beautifully consistent proportions. This was a trained, professional hand, not a scrawl. Scribes wrote it on papyrus when a document mattered, and on cheap limestone flakes and broken pottery, called ostraca, when it didn't. Those humble ostraca are pure gold for historians. At the workmen's village of Deir el-Medina, home to the artisans who built the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, archaeologists recovered thousands of them. Work rosters, absentee lists, loan notes, laundry lists, sketches, and even complaints about bad rations. This is the ancient world with its guard fully down, ordinary people writing ordinary things in fast, everyday cursive, without a single monument in sight. No civilization carves its absentee list into granite. It jots it on a broken pot. Consider one of the most important documents to survive from all of ancient Egypt, the Rhind mathematical papyrus, today in the British Museum. It's our single best source for Egyptian mathematics. Dozens of worked problems about dividing bread and beer, measuring land area, and handling their strange system of unit fractions. It was copied by a scribe named Ahmose around 1550 BCE, during the Second Intermediate Period, and he tells us he was copying from an even older Middle Kingdom text, around 1800 BCE, so the material behind it is older still. Together with the Moscow mathematical papyrus, these documents reveal a mathematical tradition far more sophisticated than the stone monuments alone would ever suggest. And the whole thing is written in hieratic, not one line of monumental hieroglyphs. The same holds for the great works of literature, like the Satire of the Trades, attributed to the author Ceti, which mockingly ranks every other profession as miserable. The potter caked in clay, the fisherman among the crocodiles, so that the scribe's clean, respected job looks golden by comparison. The same holds for the medical papyri and the sprawling business archives. The literature we admire, the science we study, the economy that fed millions, nearly all of it reaches us in cursive, never in carving. Then the story gains another layer. By around the 7th century BCE, in the crowded Nile delta of Lower Egypt, scribes pushed hieratic even further, into an ultra-rapid administrative shorthand, so streamlined that its signs barely resemble pictures at all. The Greeks later called it Demotic, the script of the people. It grew out of the fast business hand of the North, and it spread because it was efficient. You could write a contract or a receipt in Demotic far quicker than in old-fashioned hieratic. This long arc, the evolution of hieratic and Demotic scripts, is the real, working history of how Egyptians wrote from one ordinary day to the next. Over time, the roles split. Hieratic hung on for religious and literary texts. Demotic took over the contracts, the tax receipts, the private letters, and the courts of the later periods. Two cursive systems, both descended from those same picture signs, both built for speed, rather than for the eyes of eternity. And here is the twist that ties the whole thing together. The most famous writing artifact on Earth, the Rosetta Stone, carries the same priestly decree in 3 scripts, issued at Memphis in 196 BCE, under Ptolemy V of the Ptolemaic Kingdom. Everyone points to the hieroglyphs across the top, but look at the middle band, the register that an ordinary literate Egyptian standing there could actually read. That middle band is Demotic, the everyday cursive. The very stone that would one day unlock the entire ancient language has the common people's handwriting running right through its heart. The monumental script sits on top for prestige, the Greek runs along the bottom for the ruling administration, and the working Egyptian script does the real, everyday communicating in between. So when JeanFrançois Champollion finally cracked the code in 1822, he was not merely decoding pretty pictures. Scholars before him, including the Englishman Thomas Young, had already been wrestling hard with that Demotic middle section, because the cursive was a key to how the living language actually behaved. But Champollion's secret weapon was Coptic, the final living descendant of the ancient Egyptian language, still spoken in Egypt's Christian churches. By understanding how Coptic sounded, and how its vocabulary connected back through Demotic to the older forms, he could put phonetic values to signs that had been silent for over 1,000 years. Champollion's real breakthrough came from realizing that all of these scripts, monumental, hieratic, Demotic, and their Coptic descendant, were versions of one continuous Egyptian language, and that the signs recorded sounds, not just ideas. The lesson is simple, but it quietly rewires everything you thought you knew. Hieroglyphs were the monuments, but hieratic and Demotic were the mind of Egypt, the scripts of its clerks, its teachers, its doctors, its priests, and its tax collectors. Those carved walls were the parts of Egypt meant to be seen forever. The cursive was the part that actually thought, argued, counted, and remembered. The evolution of hieratic and Demotic scripts is the story of the writing Egyptians truly used, every single day, for 3,000 years. Learn to see it, and the temple walls stop being the story. The humble papyrus becomes the story. None of this fast-flowing writing would have been possible without one remarkable plant, the material that turned Egypt into the most paperwork-obsessed bureaucracy of the ancient world, and physically pushed writing from the chisel to the brush. Change the surface, and you change the script. That's next time, on Long Gone Empires, the invention of papyrus, how ancient Egypt wrote everything down,